founder of Buddhism, whose name was Siddhartha Gautama, he started out as a pantheist. He believed that everything was God, nature was God. But he ended up actually as an atheist. Did you know that? If you're a real Buddhist, you're actually an Eastern form of atheism is what you are. There's a Western form of atheism which exalts reason, and there's an Eastern form of atheism which extinguishes reason. They're just two shells of the same thing. The Buddha actually begged most of his lifetime for bread. He abandoned his family for most of his life. He did nothing to help anybody change their world. And near the end of his life, he's reported as saying, "I'm still looking for the truth." That's a quote. Jesus Christ came along and said, "I am the truth." There's a huge difference between those two. The man is probably considered one of the greatest minds in atheism. Atheism is a big thing today. A lot of people in our country are atheists. A lot of people in communist nations are atheists, and so forth. Probably the greatest philosopher of atheism is a guy named Friedrich Nietzsche, who was a German philosopher. And I don't know if you know much about him, but he was a melancholy individual. He called himself an immoralist, because that's the way he lived, actually. He eventually went insane toward the end of his life. He died mad, possibly due to contracting syphilis because of his lifestyle. He gave us the phrase, "God is dead." Jesus gave us the phrase, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will never die." John 11:25. And finally, Jesus and Muhammad, the other largest religion on the planet. I'll summarize a famous missionary named Don Richardson, or I'll quote him. He says this about Jesus and Muhammad: "Jesus raised the dead. Muhammad killed the living. Jesus healed the sick. Muhammad harmed the healthy. Jesus released the oppressed. Muhammad enslaved the free. Jesus sanctified the earth with that which is heavenly. Muhammad sullied mankind's understanding of heaven with the earthly." In fact, this is Richardson saying, Muhammad could not even reach up to touch the underside of the moral standards of an average rogue. That's his quote. The life of Jesus remains the purest and the greatest one ever lived. Ever lived. If we make any mistake in our faith, it's probably that we lower our God. We forget who He is. We forget what He said. We don't live out the reality that all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to Him, and that in every single way, there is no one like Him. No one like Him. No one comes close to being like Him. At the end of my leadership book that I wrote many years ago, I put in a little thing which is written by a man named William MacDonald. It's the epilogue of the book. And in that little epilogue, which is right at the end of the book, MacDonald basically lists the 25 reasons that make Jesus the greatest leader of all time. I tell people when I teach on the book that the whole book is worth the appendix, which I didn't write. And MacDonald ends this 25 points of what makes Jesus the greatest leader of all time. He ends it with this. He said, "Jesus met all of mankind's deepest needs, those that only the Creator and Savior of man can supply. Consequently, He's the only leader of all time when the deepest gratitude of followers wells up and admiration calls for praise and exaltation. It is not wrong to actually worship this leader as Lord and God." There is no one like Jesus. You can never have a big enough picture of Jesus. Never. We're going to spend all eternity getting the biggest and the better picture of who God is, who Jesus is. So let's try to change that a little bit right now. And let's try to live out, who He is and who He wants to be, who He is in our lives, and help Him change the world.